Alright, what's going on YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. Today we have yet another restoration video. Now I know it's another solid 18 karat gold day date, one of my favorite watches, but this one's a little bit more special. This is actually a pretty rare watch, an 18078 with a bark finish Jubilee bracelet. Now it's not in the best condition, and obviously it has some issues if it ended up here on the bench. So right now let's check functionality. When this watch first came to me, it was not running. I gave it like a pretty violent shake and somehow magically it started running. So let's see if this day and date wheel is working. Everything seems super stiff. Winding is very tight. Moving the hands, changing the date. Everything is just not working as it should. Now, hands flip over at 12. Okay. The date did flip over. However, the day and date wheels are stuck midway until about 20 minutes later. So that's not good. That's something we're going to have to address a little bit later on. For now, we're going to start breaking down this watch. Now, we're going to remove the pin that holds this into the clasp. And, of course, someone decided to put a steel pin in there. It happens. Some people lose them, and then they just replace it with whatever they have. Now, removing this bracelet, and the amount of dead skin, junk, and whatever inside of this bracelet is insane. You guys will see it a little bit later on. Now, we can go ahead and remove the other side of the bracelet. And surprisingly, this end link has pretty much no dirt in it. Now we can inspect overall condition. I've noticed quite a few dents, quite a few dings right off the bat. The crystal has some chips, has some pretty deep scratches, stuff that I cannot remove because it's sapphire. The bezel, it's pretty chewed up. For a bark finish watch, there really isn't much you could do. Unless you own the original machinery, you're never going to get the same finish, or at least the same flutes. But we definitely have an aftermarket dial here, or I should say the dial is original. However, someone went ahead and set in these baguette markers. And I'll show you guys once I take this dial off how I determine that, but I just know that this isn't the type of setting Rolex uses. And I mean these upper end links. I don't know if these are pubes or if these are arm hairs. I have absolutely no idea. However, I could tell that this watch was very well loved, very well worn. So these are things that you have to expect. There's nothing else you can do. Good cleaning will take care of all of this. Now the bracelet, once again, it's caked up with dirt and grime. Every single opening in this Jubilee bracelet is filled with some dirt, skin, whatever. All right, it's going to be great when this thing finally gets cleaned up. It's going to look brand new, or at least as close to new as I could possibly make it. Inside of the clasp, following the same criteria. Once again, guys, this is a worn watch. This is how you know that somebody actually enjoys the watch. They'll wear it. They don't care about the scratches. They just want it to work and be on their wrist. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to pop off this case back, slowly loosening that up, then we can finally take that off. And first thing I do, I always check engravings. This case back is 100% original. And I'm going to assume the same thing for this case back gasket. It's pretty much deteriorated at this point. It's rigid. It's no good. It's not going to be watertight. Now, when I was winding this watch, it was extremely tight. And this is evident by this rotor. The amount of force I have to use to move the rotor, no good. We got dirty reversing wheels or a problem underneath. We're going to remove the brittles, all the screws. Then we can go ahead and remove the stem from the movement. And then we could finally release the movement from the mid case. Now our movement is free. We remove the hands and then we could go ahead and take off this dial. Now, as I was saying before, it's definitely an original dial. But if you look at the backside, this is not how Rolex sets diamonds on their dials. Now, we're also missing a dial washer, which pretty much could have caused our day and date wheels to get stuck midway. You definitely need one on these older day dates. So I'm going to go ahead, keep on disassembling this watch, remove the day and date wheels, remove our star wheel here, and then we could go ahead and start removing everything from the bottom side. Automatic module comes off first. I really want to inspect it. I want to see what the hell is wrong with it before I go any deeper. And would you look at that? Nothing but caked up dirt, rust, just grime pretty much everywhere. All the cups, all the oil is pretty much gone. I don't know if it's evaporated, but it's just completely gummed up. And this is one of the main culprits why your watch is winding so tight. Now, most people don't even check this. They don't care. You can't see this with a loupe, all right? This needs to be done under a microscope, you know, unless it's really bad. But all the cups here, most people just throw, you know, more oil on top and say it's good to go. Absolutely not. We're going to clean it right. I'm going to get this watch running back to factory spec. Of course, first thing we want to do is remove all power from this movement. Now, this balance is still running. It ran for about another 15 minutes. I have no idea why. pretty much released everything. So now we can remove this balance bridge screw, and then we can go ahead and remove the balance and bridge itself. Moving over to the pallet fork bridge, remove the screws and then remove the bridge. Now the pallet fork was still stuck onto the bridge once again. Caked up oil. It's all gummed up. Everything's going to stick together just like this. Train a wheel bridge. All the wheels were stuck in pretty much all the pivots, all the jewels. A lot of caked up oil. Everything's gummed up, and that's a recipe for disaster. And that's what causes issues with the watch. Now we're going to keep on disassembling, remove our ratchet wheel. Then we can go ahead and remove the winding bridge itself and pull out this barrel. We'll inspect that later on. Now we're back topside. We're going to remove these screws, remove our date indicator seating. This is a big bridge, so we want to make sure that we don't hit anything on the way out. More screws are coming off. We have our date jumper. Then we go ahead and remove our day jumper as well. Now moving over to the keyless components, this is our date wheel corrector. I'm going to get that out of the way. And there's just a ton of dried up oil. It's very weird. It almost looks like, it was coated in something that's almost rubbery. Every piece that I pulled out of here, it didn't feel right. The oil didn't look right. And that's probably why this watch was having so many issues. Everything was pretty much sticking, which didn't make a whole bunch of sense to me. So getting the setting lever out of the way, then our setting wheel. And I'm surprised this actually didn't break. There was a lot of force being used to, wind this watch. So that was something I was afraid was going to actually break apart. Now moving over to the date wheel mounted, we're going to get all this off. All this MotionWorks stuff is under immense pressure. All right, that spring back there, it will send this jewel flying. Don't lose it. Use a piece of Rodico, get it out. Now we're going to press back on the spring, and then we can remove the yoke for the cam. Remove our hour wheel. Remove all the other setting wheels, and then lastly, the cannon pinion. Flip it bottom side again, remove that, and we're good to go. Now all the parts are clean. Once again, clean workstation, new finger cots, spray myself down with alcohol, and of course, now this is where grouping comes into play. I'm a very big fan of doing this, making sure that all my parts are pretty much next to each other. So I know as soon as I start putting this thing back together, I know which screws go to which bridge, to which part, this, that, whatever. This is how people always ask, how do I know where things go? Group it all up, people. Straight to the Epilum the world. We're going to send all of our cap jewels, everything into the Epilum bottle, and we're going to let that sit, and then we're going to hit it with some heat to make sure it's properly adhered to the parts. Now that that's all done, we can rebuild our barrel arbor, brand new mainspring, reinstall our minute pinion here, and then we can go ahead and put our bridge back on. Reinstall the screws, then we can go ahead and tighten those down. Now everything's been going good so far. We haven't had a lot of broken parts, but let's keep our fingers crossed. Great wheel goes in, seconds wheel goes in, then the third wheel. Then we can put down our bridge and make sure our free spin is perfect. Guys, this is how you check if all your wheels are in alignment. You should be able to move a wheel very, very lightly, and everything should just flow. That's what you want to see, so we're good to go on to the next step. Now our barrel bridge goes down, and then we could go ahead and reinstall all of the screws. You want to make sure that these are going in straight. I've seen people cross thread them, and it's a pain in the ass to get it back out. All right, so now we can go ahead and start rebuilding all the winding works. Now this is our friction spring for the crown wheel. Make sure it's facing top side up. Some 90-10 on the inner walls, and then we could go ahead and put on our crown wheel core. Now here's another thing some people might not know. This screw is actually reverse threaded. So make sure that that's going in the correct way. We have our intermediate crown wheel and then our wigwam pinion. Then we can put down our bridge. Make sure everything's functioning there as well. We have all the adequate lubrication. This HP 1300 going on the top side of the arbor. Our ratchet wheel goes down, and then we can put down the screw. Or at least I thought. All right, this is where I got so pissed. I've never had a ratchet wheel screw break, but this one broke. All right, how? How? Wasn't even 2 threads in. Whatever, I extracted the screw. I had a brand new one laying around. Pulled it off at 30-35 movement. Tighten that all down. Free spin is still good. Everything's winding. Pallet forks back in. We could readjust this, and then we could go ahead and slap in our balance and bridge. Give that a little shake, and boom. This movement has life again. Now we're going to let this run for a few minutes. I want the pallet stones to get a nice cut in them with the Epilum, and then we'll take it back off and re-lubricate. Moving back up topside, we're putting together all the keyless works here. Everything's going down beautifully. Everything's nice and clean. Everything has been re-lubricated. So that's the biggest part. All right, everything's clean, and look at that. Now the watch is winding perfect, smooth, it's operational, it's clicking in and out, balance is stopping. That's exactly what we want. Double checking our hour and minute wheel are engaging. Beautiful, they are, so no problem there. Then we're going to go ahead and put back on this yoke for the cam. See that little jewel? Thank God I didn't lose it. All right, put a little bit of 9010 on the stud just to make sure that it stays seated. Very, very little. You don't need that oil flying around everywhere. Release the tension on the spring, then we can lay this back onto its post. Once again, we're going to release the tension from the spring, move over the yoke, and then we could reinstall the cam with Canon. Now this, you need to make sure that the jewel is seated in that little groove. You'll see everything fall right into place. You'll pretty much feel it. Now we can release the tension, put down our calendar wheel, and make sure that this is fully seated once again. Now this clip up here, you want to make sure that the holes, they align, everything is fitting in place. Make sure that the stud is going through the opening on top before we put down our calendar wheel nut. Once again, this is a reverse threaded screw. Now we're going to check for functionality, make sure that this is all moving. You don't want to click this over until you have the day and date wheel in, but we're going to still check, make sure that everything's engaging. Our date wheel mounted is moving, so we're good to move over to the day jumper as well as the date jumper. We want to make sure that both of these are in place before setting down our date indicator seating. Just makes everything a lot easier. We're going to put both these screws back down, tighten them up, make sure everything is good to go there. Then we can go ahead, put some 9010 on our hour wheel, throw back on our star wheel, and make sure that it's fully engaged with both the day and date jumper. You'll feel those click in. Once they're good, give it a nice pat down. Then we can reinstall our date indicator seating. Make sure that this is good, right in the spot. Throw the screws down, tighten this all down, and we're pretty much ready to go. We're ready for the day and date wheels to go back in. So we're going to slap those on. Once again, triangle to triangle. It's pretty self-explanatory, honestly. Rolexes are like Legos. Very easy to put back together, very easy to take apart. Our day wheel has a nice square notch. We're going to make sure that that's aligned. And now we're ready to put a dial down. Always check, make sure that both the day and date wheel are sitting correctly. Our date is straight as well as our day. Now, this was the screw that actually caused this watch to stop running. Finally figured out that it was actually to hold down the dial. There's a dial post screw, so we're going to reinstall that. We're going to put our dial down, and then once again, like I always say, check for functionality before moving on. Beautiful. We're able to change our date perfectly. Our quick set function is working, and then we can go ahead and start flipping around the hands. We want to make sure that this thing is flipping over both the day and date wheel at the same time. They're not getting hung up midway like they were before. Now we go ahead, pull the crown out to the last position, start spinning those imaginary hands, and hopefully that day and date wheel flip right over. Beautiful. Now we can go ahead, start putting down our hands, or so I thought we could. Now this dial, once again, these markers, they are aftermarket. They are way too big. They're sitting way too high up off the dial, and one of them is actually extremely loose. All right, our 7 o'clock marker here, I'm checking all of the other markers, and as you guys can see, it's literally jumping off the dial. So if this guy wears the watch and it shakes and the marker comes off, we're going to have a pretty big issue. So while the glue is drying, I had no other option. We're going to clean off these hands. Now they are oxidized, so a lot of people like to say, oh, you should have replaced the hands. Guys, sometimes hands are expensive, all right? And finding brand new OEM ones is very, very hard. We can remove the oxidization by putting it on a jeweler's cube, put it in the right hole, and lightly brush it. No pun intended there. We're going to go ahead and set down this hour hand very, very lightly. We want to make sure that it's perfectly aligned at 12 o'clock. We don't want to press it down fully. We want to make sure we're using the correct tip. We're not ovalizing the hand or bending it. But once again, just a light tap to make sure that it's on its correct post. Then we can test and make sure that it's flipping over directly at 12 o'clock. Now let's see how close we are, and beautiful. Right at 12 o'clock, we're good to go. Let's start putting down this minute hand. Once again, correct size tip, very lightly to ensure it's on the post. And then once again, we test again. Test, test, test. It's always what you want to do before you case up a watch. Make sure everything's working properly. Now let's see how close we are to 12 o'clock with this minutes hand on. And we're about there, maybe a minute early, but that's perfectly fine. We can readjust that, pull the hand off. Now, these hands, they cannot go fully down how they are intended. All right, otherwise we're going to collide with the markers, and that's actually what was happening prior. I don't think the guy noticed it, but the underside of the minute's hand was completely erect. It had a nice groove cut out because every time it spun around, this 7 o'clock diamond marker would always cut into it. Now, once again, I glued it down. I got everything running correctly. The hands are all sturdy on the posts, so we're good to go. Let's check how this thing is running. Now, the movement's on the time grapher, and from what I could tell right off the bat, baby, come on. First try, didn't have to do any adjusting. I'm just kidding. Tons of adjusting. We're running at +3 seconds. Great amplitude. Beat error could be adjusted a little bit more. But for now, this is perfect. Now we can turn our attention over to the mid case, the bracelet, the bezel. And right off the bat, you guys saw me do it in the last video. I'm not too confident with this one, all right? There is some crazy pinpoint dents in this case back that I don't think are going to flatten out. I'm sorry, but I'm going to try and do my best here. There's a lot of cuts in the actual case from both removing the bracelet. You know, there's just tons of dings, dents, and whatever. Once again, he wore the watch. Now, our mid case, on the other hand, it's not as bad as I initially thought. I cleaned it up a little bit. I just pretty much wiped it down. Our bezel's in decent condition. The mid case sides, we got some dings and dents, all right? I'm not going to go crazy. I'm not going to over polish this thing. You guys know how I work. But these lugs need so much attention. They are so dinged up. They're so uneven. So we need to flatten these things out. We need to make sure that they are the same thickness. Otherwise, this case just looks disproportionate. Now, once again, fluted bezel. Can't really do anything without the machine. Same thing for the bark, all right? Very, very light refinishing. That's going to go down on this bracelet. But this clasp, it needs to be relapped. The back side of this bracelet, it needs to be relapped. Somebody decided, let me just start polishing everything. I don't know. I feel like some refinishers, they just kind of make up their own finishes. They don't even look at a reference photo. Same thing for the sides of these links. These are not supposed to be high polished. You can see the remnants of previous lapping. But somebody decided, let me just high polish it. Why not? Now, when I did remove the bezel, I noticed a few things. You could actually see it in the rehaut with the crystal still on it. But there was a few dents and dings in the actual rehaut. Now, this is not good, all right? This is caused by somebody removing the bezel with incorrect tools. You know, they keep on hammering it in to get it underneath the bezel and the mid case, and they pretty much hit the rehaut wall. Now, a little bit of camera magic later, and check out this mid case. Sorry, guys, I had to do this on the fly. Couldn't really film the whole thing, but check out these lugs. Look at how flat. Look at the lapping. It's clean. It's crisp. The underside of this case here. Notice how none of the engravings have been sanded away. We were able to remove most of the dings and dents without really messing with the structural integrity of the mid case. But overall, I'm extremely happy. Look at how the sides, they're playing with the light. See my face in there? Look at the distortion as you move it along. It's stretching the picture. This is exactly what you want to see. You want to see everything get filled in until it's facing you head on. Now, this clasp came out phenomenal. Beautiful. Rebrushed with that polished cornet. This is exactly how it should have looked. Same thing for the clasp. This thing cleaned up beautifully. I'm actually very happy with this. There's not much you could really do here. I'm not going to lie. It's not perfect, but it is a million times better than how it came in. Now, for a polish like this, there's not much I could do. I can't refinish this bark finish, so it doesn't make sense. Plus, this watch has already been dinged up so bad, like on this case back. I don't want to mess with it. You got to know when to quit, all right? Less is more and more is less sometimes. But this case back, it looks a million times better. The overall refinish came out great. Now we can go ahead and case this thing back up. Blow out the crystal, blow off the dial. Once again, then we slap on our mid case. Flip this over. Now we can reinstall our crown. Make sure all proper lubrication is on there and slide it back in. Once again, we're going to double check. Make sure that it's winding. And as you guys can see there, our ratchet wheel is moving. So beautiful. We can move over, reinstall all of our brittles, all of our screws, and make sure that we're tightening this. I try and tell people, tighten it like you're tightening a car wheel. A little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit here, a little bit there. That ensures that the movement is level inside of the mid case. But what I didn't expect was this. Now, as I'm tightening them down, once again, I'm following my same instructions. Back and forth, back and forth. Watch that balance wheel. Notice how it just stopped? I've seen this happen before, all right? So this is basically when people try and put a 295C crystal on, let's say, a 16013. The crystals are two different sizes and the gasket is not tall enough. So what happens is the seconds hand actually hits the top of the crystal and causes the watch to stop running. So I had to throw on a 3mm tall gasket as well as a new crystal. This is the only way to ensure that this watch is going to be running without issue. All right. Automatic module, fully rebuilt. Look at how freely spinning this is. It's beautiful. It's moving around on its own now. No pressure. Bezel goes back down. We ensure that this thing is watertight. And once again, before we tighten up that case back, double check functionality. The watch is winding. The watch quickset is working. And then we're going to go ahead and test. Make sure that our hands are flipping over at 12 o'clock once again. You guys see a lot of testing goes into something like this, but it just, you need to. All right, you need to. You don't want to close this thing up and then realize you have an issue later. It doesn't make sense. This thing is beautiful now. It's running properly. It's been refinished. And overall, I don't think I can ask for a much better result. Now, as always, guys, like I say, less is more. And in this case, this is the perfect example. We pretty much just breathe new life into this watch. A little bit of refinish work goes a long way, especially with the proper finishes. Now, the center links, they shouldn't be high polished. The sides of the links, they should be lapped. Everything should be brushed. Realistically, a watch like this doesn't see much high polish, other than the mid case, the sides of the clasp, and a little bit on the crown. But in between the lugs, we got everything cleaned up. This case looks phenomenal. This clasp looks phenomenal. Overall, I'm extremely happy with this watch, and I know Richard will be happy with it as well. Guys, as always, thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Head over to the website if you're looking to buy or sell, and follow me on Instagram. I'll catch you on the next one.